It is the night for the 5th, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 8. And it is Formula One Fridays. We will go long. We will talk. You guys will have to keep me honest. We'll go through all the news and all the F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. We'll talk about driver ratings, in particular Isaac Hadjar. We'll talk about Yuki Tsunoda not moving back to the UK, staying at the base of the Racing Bulls. Likes the taste of the pasta there, so too the taste of the red wine. We'll talk about Ferrari being intolerable as far as their multitudinous mistakes. So too we'll talk about Zach Brown putting pressure on the Bulls that are red, saying that they're wasting time in all of these useless protests around tyre water. How then are they keeping those tyres within the operating temperature window in a way that no other team, none of the other 18 cars can on the grid? So too we'll talk about Max Verstappen and his debut at the Nordschleife Nürburgring as what's his name, Franz Hermann, pseudonym from Max Verstappen. He told you, chat, that this wouldn't change nothing, that him having his firstborn by dint of his Mrs. Kelly PK, that he was always going to be a racer, and this is proof positive of that, is it not? So too we'll talk about Cadillac F1. Let's say that first, actually, because there's a lot of chat about who's going to be in that Cadillac F1 car in 2026, linked intrinsically to Mohammed Ben Sulayem, FIA president by dint of DP World. Mohammed Ben Sulayem's brother owns that company and they're in charge of the logistics for GM. Conflict of interest any? But I digress. We won't talk about that because Carlos Sainz Sr. doesn't want us to, nor does Mohammed Ben Sulayem. That notwithstanding, Cadillac F1 have a couple different options on the table. Rumour is that Checo Perez is sniffing around that seat, in addition to the seat over at Alpine. And again, they're doing one of these, aren't they? Fabio keen to double his money as far as the Carlos Slim sponsorship settings. Colapinto already will bring anywhere between 20 and 30 million dollars courtesy of Mercado Libre, I want to say, sponsorship. And then Carlos Slim with Checo Perez would come with an extra 20 million US dollars, potentially at Alpine. Therefore, if not Alpine, it will be where? Cadillac F1. Carlton Herta as well as chimed in and said it would be great for Cadillac F1, a good look. The optics would be brilliant, particularly around the Mexican Grand Prix, if they were the first F1 team who had not one but two Mexican drivers in that seat. Either one, if I'm chiming in. I'm not sure that I want to see Checo Perez back in there. However, there are some F1 aficionados that are looking at Red Bull with a side eye, skeptical hippo face, saying something to this effect: those two bods that replaced Checo Perez with, in the first instance Liam Lawson and in the second Tsunoda-san, Yuki, that they're nowhere near what Checo Perez. All you're doing is proving all the naysayers wrong, that you've built a car that's so difficult to drive that only Max can drive it. Anyone else jumps in that car and they're going to be upwards of a second behind the four soon-to-be five-time champion Max Verstappen. Checo Perez will be thinking this. He fell foul of it. His career fell foul of it. Ambassador settings is what he got demoted to last year, but now we're hearing that potentially he's back on the grid. I'm not sure I want to see Checo Perez. There are far too many young, hungry lions, God-tier, potentially God-tier F1 peddlers waiting in the wings. They're yet to get a bite at the F1 cherry. Take off the sub-bencher Felipe Drugovich. What about Teo Pourchaire? There are a gazillion others coming through after the two most recent F2 winners after Gabriel Bortoleto. What are we doing? Checo Perez. Do you know what I mean? You've got yourself a beautiful family and zero pace in an F1 car. Move on, therefore, sir. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about Zach Brown and McLaren, it's still getting very techy as far as this phase changing material. Shout out to B Sport, by the way, for a god tier video, and it will get techy. The FIA have said that they will publish and again post the Miami Grand Prix on the back of a multitudinous of Red Bull protests. Thermal imagery. They've been doing everything have Red Bull. We're trying to do two things, I think Christian Horner is. In the first instance, disturb the momentum, the ever-pervasive, suffocating, almost claustrophobic momentum of McLaren. They have doable competitive advantage. You saw over the course of 37, 40 laps potentially at the Miami Grand Prix post virtual safety car, that they were able to gap Maximilian Verstappen to the tune of, as near as makes no difference, 40 seconds. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is material. If you're talking a tenth, a story told in tenths as far as Formula One is concerned, then a tenth, 40, maybe 0.3, 0.4, that's massive. A chasm, 1 whole second. Mate, Houston, we have a problem. Therefore, that's why Christian Horner's getting his thermal imaging camera out with a view to understand how the McLaren, in the form of their MCL 3.9 iteration, is keeping their tyres cool. Now, there's a lot of chatter about phase changing materials potentially being used, and that might be something. Whatever it is, Christian knows that he needs to get to the bottom of it. Zach Brown is saying, listen, for every protest, for everything that you're filing with the FIA, you need to pay something anywhere between 100 and 200 grand for every failed challenge. Because all you're doing, Zach Brown says, is you're tyre wasting. You saw Zach Brown on the bloody pit wall with his tyre water, goading now Christian Horner, because in his hands is the championship. Both of them are the drivers and constructors variety, and that means that it's going to get techier and techie things. Let me tell you about Yuki Tsunoda quickly. I read this article. I was like, who is this chap? Like, who does he think he is? I'm rooting on you, Yuki, but you know already we're not going to get an easy time on here. We've got to get, like, you are a brilliant driver. We've seen what you, when Yuki's had his Weetabix, you know what Yuki can do. Like, could he be a God tier 1 at some point in the future? 100%. I don't doubt that for a second. However, when the dude is moving and talking like he's already got 4, soon to be 5-time champion privilege. Like, what are you talking about? And when asked the question, you're going to move back to Milton Keynes so you can spend more time at the factory because you're now a Red Bull Racing driver, no longer a Racing Bulls driver based in Italy. He said, nah, mate, what am I moving for? I'm based out of Italy now and I'm going to stay here. What? Who's this chap think he is? The next time that Tsunoda-san yeets it into the barrier, everybody's going to be pointing at that quote. And that means that matters as far as Tsunoda-san's concerned, especially when you have the likes of Arvid Lindblad waiting the win. So too Liam Lawson. What are we doing, chat? And then on the other side of the Red Bull Racing garage, you have yourself one Maximilian Verstappen. And again, don't stop glazing, Cameron. I can hear them already in my ears. Stop glazing. But it's not as if all things circling Maximilian Verstappen doesn't mean that he is very much the blast radius of Formula One. Let me show you what I mean in the first instance. You remember that he said he was just going to crack on with his racing, that people speculated that when you become a father, something changes, your risk management, you've got to recalibrate everything because ultimately you're going home to a family now. Well, Max Verstappen said, behave yourself. I'm a racer. I'm here to race always, each and every single time. This is a shot of one Franz Hermann racing under a pseudonym even, not looking to bring attention to himself. This happened over the last 48 hours when Maximilian Verstappen was out here racing bloody GT3. What are we doing here? This dude potentially is going to go and get himself a license and race in this different season, potentially to set up a sabbatical. Maybe. Potentially to set up another season, not in F1. Maybe. Who the fudge knows at this point? I'm telling you, it's going to get techier than techie things as far as Maximilian Verstappen. Oh, Wayne, you're an absolute legend. It is cheating, but normal. Go on, let's address this very quickly because I termed it cheating. And many 2 decimal place jockeys said, oh, Cameron, how can it be cheating if it's within the rule? Well, you don't know. The rules are a fluid thing, aren't they? The goalposts are always moving as far as the FIA. Last year, Tom Biasis, FIA director, came out and said, well, the load test is this and it won't change. Only shortly thereafter to change his mind and say, well, the load test isn't enough because people are losing flexi wings. No kidding, Sherlock. Go. I say all that to say this. The rules are doing one of these all the bloody time. Are they cheating? Well, probably not, or maybe so, depending on who you're talking to. Christian Horner, with all his thermal imaging, is saying that they are. What do you mean? oh, it's not cheating, they're just operating within the rules. Behave yourself. These 2 decimal place jockeys, I don't know, something about the F1 community and the extent of the intellectual snobbery and gatekeeping it flares up my allergies. Telling you, Turtle, absolutely. He sleeps racing. Yeah, no, credit to him, Turtle. Daniel, I think you make the point there that he's just the racing driver, is Max. And again, stop glazing, Cameron. I can hear the abbots of unreason in my head. Stop, well, you have to talk about Max. Well, here's why. Let me show you, because this is going to get techie now. In the first instance, let me shout out Sky Sports F1, yeah. God tier podcast. But before I say all that, I need to preface that with this. We're going to go through some clips. Still failures, man. There's something about Formula One where people think they can get away with murder. This is Sky Sports F1. I pay my £90 to them each and every single month because I anticipate that they're going to put the best product together, whether that's the broadcast on race day, qualifying, etc., or even their podcast. Lest we forget, they've got the access. They've got the direct line to all the drivers, all the key personnel as at May 2025. So I expect the best in every facet, every aspect of podcasting. So much to my surprise when I tuned into 2 F1 shows, 2 Sky Sports F1 podcasts. And this is what I hear. They're still in COVID times, chat. It's as if they don't even know how to unmute a mic or edit in post. Let me play this. I'm going to shut up. Let me play you this clip. You tell me what you guys can hear.
His own, he said, I didn't know. His last words for Alpine. I didn't know. What am I supposed to do when he was tagged and crashed? Do we think it's going to be difficult for him watching on and seeing as a reserve driver, he's continuing that?
Can you guys hear that? Is it just me? Am I going crazy? Does that not sound like the creature out of Blade? He's on the Sky Sports F1 podcast. Mind, context is key. This is Sky Sport. This isn't your noddy Cameron C6. These are not YouTubers. This is Sky Sports. They've got $1 gazillion to throw at post-production to make sure it doesn't sound like a creature off of Blade. Is it in? Now, let me play that again because maybe it's me being stupid. Listen to this and tell me whether their editor in post-production hasn't been sleeping on the job. Roll the clip again, Cameron.
His own, he said, I didn't know. His last words for Alpine. I didn't know. What am I supposed to do when he was tagged and crashed? Do we think it's going to be difficult for him watching on and...
It's kind of... And Simon Lazenby, by the way, his speech in the gospel, he's dropping some really, really good things, talking about Jack Doohan's exit and how he knew that it was going to happen. Seeing Jack Doohan and Ollie Oates get carted off almost, and then you can hear the creature from Blade in the background. Easy G, what are we doing here? It's hilarious, but also very perturbing if you are a fan of F1 who's paying your £90 a month to get, what in my humble opinion, in that instance, is a subpar product. But then you got to give them some credit, right? Balancing games, because again, they dial in on their second iteration of podcast in the week. This is the God tier one where the likes of Bernie Collins, Martin Brundle and Ted Kravitz rock up. The holy trinity of F1 broadcasting, some might say. And I want to run through some clips with you because people say that I'm glazing Max and so too glazing Oscar Piastri. But when other people, F1 aficionados, infinitely more intelligent and acutely aware of the circumstance, there is the one that Fs, echo your sentiments. Sometimes you've got to defer to the experts. Roll the first clip, Cameron.
For me, what was instructive, if you're going to be world champion this year, you've got to beat Max Verstappen, okay? Even if he doesn't have the best car. And the way for me was the way that Oscar raced and passed Verstappen seemed a little less frenetic, maybe is the word, than Lando. A little more sure in the end. They took about the same amount of time to pass Max, although Lando did, of course, have to go off track and then give the place back, and Oscar kept on track at all the time. But I've got a real doozy of a question for you, Martin. Does Max race Oscar differently than he races Lando?
Oof. Question to Martin Brundle there, but I want to touch on the first instance, the opening stanza of the legend that is Teddy K. Look, he's talking about how forensic Oscar Piastri is in the overtake, and I think this matters for a couple of different reasons. Frederick Vasseur for 2025, and again, we're having this conversation under the umbrella heading of who's going to win this year's championship of the drivers' variety. Now look, Frederick Vasseur has already told you that he thinks this is something of a qualifying championship, and I bet he's been tongue-in-cheek there. Don't graze his razor him, but he's talking about how important it is to put it on pole if indeed you want to win 25 points and therefore go on to win the championship this year. It is important, chat. I would argue that there is only one thing less, there's only one thing. The second most important thing after dropping it on pole is this, chat: over bloody taking. And who after Maximilian Verstappen, if we're analysing the evidence of the first 6 races, who after Max Verstappen has proven himself most capable of overtaking in any circumstance, regardless of the weather? I think he has a name, and his name is Oscar Piastri. Freudian slip there. So you understand what I'm saying? Look at the evidence. Let's go through Exhibit A, B and C. Baku last year, you would have seen God-tier manoeuvre from Oscar Jack Piastri, notwithstanding the fact that he had a mini DRS. He's still got to execute for the move on Charles Leclerc. So too, probably the second best manoeuvre of last year, the one on Lando Norris around the second chicane at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. You're not even supposed to overtake around there. And then you say 2 races consecutive where Oscar Piastri is now managing to manipulate the car on and around the limits of adhesion, up close and personal with the 4 soon to be 5-time champion Maximilian Verstappen. You guys have heard me say a gazillion times, if F1 maths is a thing, we should leverage it. Therefore, in 2021, I never thought I would see another driver do the things to Sir Lewis that Maximilian Verstappen was capable of doing. Exhibit A, the sprint race in Silverstone. Max just drove away from Lewis at his favourite bloody track. Nobody does that. So Black Swan for me. I could barely conceive of it, let alone think that I was going to see it happen. And then to boot, you want to go and check out COTA. And again, I never thought I would see Sir Lewis Hamilton on fresher compound tyres, held back, held off, defended against by anyone, yet alone a young, hungry lion in Maximilian Verstappen at the ripe old age of 23. And we saw both of those things. Now I think Max is that guy. You'll hear Martin Brundle talk about how good he thinks Maximilian Verstappen is since we're glazing Max Verstappen. Now Max is the guy. You've seen what he's up to over the past 2 to 3 years. Brazil 2024, Monaco set to free. We can go through the examples. Suzuka qualifying this year, and like we can go through them. Round the outside of Charles Leclerc a couple of years ago on a full tank of fuel in monsoon conditions, turn 1. So you get the picture. It says exhibit A, B, C, D, all the way up to Z. But if that's who we know Max to be, and we're leveraging F1 mathematics, because this is counting though, very basic, compare the market. And now we see that Oscar Piastri can race with Maximilian Verstappen, even normalised for a car that's anywhere between 8 and 9 tenths quicker. Even normalised for that. What does that mean about Oscar Piastri? What does that mean about his uppermost ceiling? What does that mean about him and his probability of winning his first championship in 2025? I'm going to play about that, Kip, because there's an important piece at the end.
For me, track and then give the place back. And Oscar kept on track it all the time. But I've got a real doozy of a question for you, Martin. Does Max race Oscar differently than he races Lando?
Before Brundle answers this, and Brundle's God tier all the way through this podcast, by the way, link will be in the description. Go and have a listen to it yourself on a watch. I think Max realises that he has to. I think Lando Norris, and this is controversial, chat, I think in Maximilian Verstappen's eyes, Lando Norris is a doormat. He doesn't have that level of racing intelligence, and he's proving it on a gazillion occasions, right? Yeah, of course he's fast, but he's fast and furious. He's a racehorse that is blinkered, whereas Oscar Piastri is the antithesis. He's seeing everything in 3D, 4D even, because that's the level of chess moves that he's making. Let's hear what Martin Brundle has to say in response to that question from Teddy K. Roll the clip.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Piastri's overtake on Verstappen was set up for several corners, wasn't it? He worked it out over the laps. He followed him, and then it was lap 14 when he eventually got past. And he basically ended up forcing Max. And Max had even been told by GP Lambiese's engineer, stay to the inside. Max did that. And then Oscar, just dollied him up a treat. Max is tight into turn one on the dirty line, has to brake late. Oscar saw it all unfolding, actually had to turn left a little bit. He realised that Max was going to slide and was going to brake. And that's sort of driving somebody else's car at the same time as driving your own car. That's what we're talking about here. He just had a little jink left, ducked underneath and disappeared. And that was all one big cunning plan that came to fruition nicely.
Go on then. So obviously Martin doesn't answer the question because your boy Cameron's brought up the wrong clip, but nevertheless, seminal points, each and every single one. The Oscar Piastri's driving two people's car. Who, ladies and gentlemen, does that remind you of? He's suffocating anybody that is attacking, trying to overtake. He's not leaving them with any options. This is checkmate in 4 or 5 moves. Do you know what I mean? You go there, I'm going to go here. And when you go there, what happens 2 to 3 turns down the road is checkmate. Oscar Piastri is Kasparov in this 2025 in a racing car. Super cool, super calm, and more than anything, super calculated in a way that Lando Norris could never be. Chat. And then this is something that I disagree with Martin Brundle. He's talking about how drivers develop and grow over the course of a campaign, particularly if there's a championship of the drivers' variety at stake. Let's hear what Martin has to say.
But what I do know from history is that when drivers are up for a world championship, they step their game up. They find an overdrive gear. We've seen it over the years, over the decades, when they just take off and they just improve every aspect of what they're doing. And, I don't... Lando in the main race, Max has gone into the first corner, locked the front axle, starting to run wide. Lando's tucked underneath him, tracks, clear ahead of him, packs on his tail, and he hit the throttle. And because it looked, if he had gone steaming around the outside of turn 2, it looked genius for Lando. And then Max had a slide. Max's problems in turns 1 and 2 cost Lando the Grand Prix, as far as I'm concerned. So, but you can't say Lando should have done anything other than hit the throttle to go. It looked like an overtaking opportunity. So
in the second, I don't disagree with anything that Brundle's got to say there. I'm not sure that Lando could have done anything other than what he ended up doing. However, should he have been in that circumstance in the first place? I would argue probably not. He should have been on pole. Remember what Frederick Vasseur said, that this is a qualifying championship. Therefore, you can't afford to make errors in quali, especially if you've got a fire-breathing dragon in Maximilian Verstappen breathing down your neck, and you're prone to a cheeky mistake, and you lack for confidence and mental fortitude or lack thereof. If you're Lando Norris, then putting it on pole has never been more important, particularly if you harbour aspirations of winning races and shortly thereafter championships. Martin Brundle, by the way, when he was asked the question about whether Max races Oscar differently to Lando, resounding yes, matter of fact, yes, full stop, new paragraph. That Maximilian Verstappen has to realise that Oscar is different. You can even hear it in the way he characterises Oscar's performances. Max recently said in the past couple of weeks, I want to say not after this Grand Prix, but after the previous Saudi Arabia, Jeddah Corniche, round 5, that Oscar Piastri is racing really well, super cool and calm of head, and makes no mistakes. Au contraire, Lando Norris, who makes all the bloody mistakes, fast as fudge, but fast and furious, error prone, like, I don't know, his old mate, modern day Jean Lazy, some might say. And here's where we got talking about Maximilian Verstappen proper, because some people say that Martin Brundle and the British broadcasters, the internationally syndicated Sky F1, have a penchant to a bit of British bias sometimes. Do you know what I mean? I mean, sometimes Brundle, I feel like Brundle 9 times out of 10, in contrast to Johnny Herbert, is a straight shooter, especially when he's talking about F1, sporting endeavour, par excellence. And then he gets into his bag and starts talking about Maximilian Verstappen. And that's exemplified. Roll the clip.
Only pick the car up and carry it so long, and when the tyres go off, he then, as soon as he got passed by Oscar, he was moaning about the balance and the grip and what have you. And I think that was sheer frustration on his part, and that's just the way it is. He can only pick the car up and carry it so long, and when the tyres go off, he then, as soon as he got passed by Oscar, he was moaning.
Touche, Martin. He's nailed it. Max can only do so much. And this is what the naysayers and anti-Maxers will leverage against him. That, listen, he's a fast car merchant. When Adrian Newey's not there, Maximilian Verstappen can't do anything. But their failing is to normalise for the bloody deficit. No one can do impossible things, not even Ayrton Senna or Alain Prost. You can't take the car and put it in a place where physically it's impossible, where it will not go. When people say outperform, I hate it when people gripe as well. You can't outperform the car. What people are saying when they say outperform the car is outperform it as versus what other drivers would do in that car. That's what Maximilian Verstappen did at the bloody in qualifying at Saudi Arabia. So too at Miami. He didn't have the quickest car. The race proved it. Yet and still you see Mumpo. Safat, the battle with Oscar was similar to his battle with... It's a very good, very, very good analogy, Safat. Aikido settings, almost using Max's aggression against him, kind of a little bit different to Silverstone a couple of years ago, but it's a good analogy, Safa. Wayne says OJ and Lando have the fastest cars by seconds, mate. When Lewis and Max had the fastest cars, they beat the brakes off everybody. These youngsters aren't doing that, so I'm not impressed. I don't hate it, Wayne. Again, decent analogy that. Go on, let me play this next clip, because this one's where it gets a bit gangster.
They will both address all and every in any issues that they have where they need to improve, and just they'll both raise their gains. But there's just something in the way, Lando's not quite as decisive how he places the car when he.
So, let me address this very quickly. So this was in response to the question about whether Lando will fix. I didn't play it to you, but I'll explain it to you. Whether Lando and Oscar will fix for the errors, because both of them are still making errors. Oscar made one in Australia. I'd argue that he made a second one in Suzuka qualifying Sector 2. Lando made a big error, a massive one of gargantuan proportions and consequences at the previous Grand Prix, Saudi Arabia, yeeting it into the bloody barrier in qualifying. I would argue that champions tend not to do that, not in a championship circumstance. That what characterises champions is that they can bring the best out of themselves during the big points when they need it most. And Lando, I don't think, has that. Of course, he's super bloody quick, but he doesn't have that. Who does have that is the other McLaren driver, and he has a name. His name is Oscar Piastri. I disagree with the legend that is Martin Brundle. And again, far for it to be me to disagree with Martin Brundle. If I'm going to defer to expertise over here, do you know what I mean? Legendary F1 driver and the best broadcaster, bar none, that we've had since Murray Walker. Again, anything can and most often does happen in Formula 1. But here's what Martin's saying, that he reckons that both Lando and Oscar are going to feel trait out for their mistakes over the course of the season because of the stakes, that there is a championship there to win. I would contend ever so slightly. Listen, I think Martin's halfway right there, but I would tinker with his wording ever so slightly. I would change one word in that sentence. I don't think both those drivers will tinker and improve, amend. I think that's a characteristic that only champions exhibit. Again, we're talking about extracting the best out of yourself in the peakest of peakiest moments. Do you know what I mean? Lando Norris doesn't have that. Oscar Piastri went away between this season and last and worked on his deficits. Tyre management was always one of his weaknesses now, and he's fixed for that. Qualifying pace in absolute terms, he was getting mollywopped by Lando Norris. 20-3, 20-4. Lando Norris beat him in qualifying, including sprint. So what do you think about that? Lando Norris. What's changed, Chapel? What's changed is that Oscar Piastri went away and had a look in the accountability mirror. He realised what his deficiencies were, and together with his team, Mark Webber, the physio, bloody Tom Stollard, went away and fixed for those. No, because he's got a god tier team around him who aren't yes men and who aren't there to just stroke his ego. They're invested in him getting better with the end game and goal to get that dude a championship of the drivers variety. Let me continue with this clip.
He's overtaking, I don't think, and he'll learn from that. But the way he went past, was it George? Was extraordinary. Actually, a really unorthodox overtaking place. But to answer your question, yes, I think that's exactly where they are. But I wouldn't say that's going to stay like that for the rest of the season.
True. Lando Norris will absolutely improve, and he was brilliant at times. But if he's overtaking Max Verstappen, he will always struggle, because that's the pressurized circumstance. All of a sudden, that F1 cockpit, when he sees that Max Verstappen car with the number 1 in front of it and his gearbox, everything becomes all of a sudden very claustrophobic and pressurized, because he knows every single time he's tried to overcome that Maximilian Verstappen overtake hurdle, he has struggled. Austria, this race just passed. There's been as gazillion times. Abu Dhabi last year, he looked incredible. Why? Because all of a sudden the pressure was relieved from his shoulders. He had Carlos Sainz chasing him down, and that's a very different Rubik's Cube of the automotive pugilistic variety for which Lando needs to solve for, devoid now of pressure. That's why after that race he got up on his high horse, didn't he, Lando, and said next year will be my year. Roll this next clip, Cameron.
Cars not, if you took Max out of the Red Bull at the moment, where do you think they are? Are they 4th or 5th fastest? Probably, if you took Max out of that equation. I mean, it's a punchy thing to say, but he's driving beautifully, and I don't think having a child will make any difference whatsoever. We're a pretty selfish bunch, racing drivers, and you're focused, got your blinkers on in the car. And, I had kids when I was in 2 wonderful children in Charlie and Alex. And you almost, tick in a box where you think, yeah, okay, if the worst happens, there's there's lineage there, sort of thing. It's not going to slow you down.
You see, this is why we're different, chat. Racing drivers don't think like ordinary humans, ordinary civilians. Martin Brundle saying, listen, I've got lineage in the bag now that I've had my kids. If anything, that's going to increase how risk seeking I am, reduce my level of risk management, because I don't need to wait to have kids anymore. That's chaos. And I think he's speaking to Max Verstappen's circumstance. That's why you see that dude out in the car racing with a view to potentially race the Nordschleife this year. What are we doing, chat? Nonsense. Go on, let me play this. This is really important. Out of sync. But again, this is Brundle talking about how and why he thinks Maximilian Verstappen races Oscar different as versus Lando Norris.
100%. Yes,
in what way?
Unquestionably.
In what way?
I think he knows. He knows that there's something a bit more Street Fighter about Oscar Piastri, and he saw it, in Jeddah. I think Max knows he's got a different animal when Oscar's in his mirrors, not by much than Lando, just positioning of the car. There's a decisiveness about what he did that, but you can't criticize Lando's racecraft, because the way he passed the Mercedes and eventually passed Max was just top draw, in particular. But somehow, I have absolutely no doubt that, and just
techie, very, very techie. I think Martin's right. Ultimately, on the racetrack, as in life, real recognize real. And I think Max Verstappen, by dint of his comments recently about Oscar Piastri, that tells you all you need to know, right? This is not Lando Norris. This dude is gifted. He is planning. He's cerebral. He's seeing the 4D landscape of chess for what it is. Techie. And then here you go. Here's Martin again, your final clip, and it gets techier than techie things. Here's what he thinks about Maximilian Verstappen, British bias and all.
It's the same story, isn't it? Friday, this car won't turn, won't brake, it's got no grip. They work. And then he pulls the magic out in qualifying and sticks it on pole just to remind everybody how good he is. And there are very few people in the Formula One paddock that would argue with you that anything other than that he's the best out there at the moment. He's extraordinary. He's got it all together. It's the same story, isn't it? Friday, this car won't turn, won't brake, it's got no grip. They work.
That chap is extraordinary. Nobody, says Martin Brundle, in the paddock would argue with you when you're saying that he's the best at the moment. And again, this is why I want to speak to. I want to speak to a growing throng of the fan base that want to have something to say against Maximilian Verstappen now that he's not winning every race. I would contend, and have always contended, that when Max Verstappen doesn't have the quickest car, that's when you're going to see his greatness in plena color. That's when you see him putting it on pole when he has no bloody right to. That RB21 should not have been put on pole, not at Suzuka, not at Saudi Arabia, and definitely not at the Miami Grand Prix. And what's this chap doing? He's converting. For those in the know, he's converting, making of skeptics believers. And that's got to be important. If he can get it done, Wayne, to your question, if Maximilian Verstappen can win this championship, the boys and girls over at McLaren need to ask themselves some questions. Again, they will have succeeded in seizing defeat from the Moors, no jaws of victory even. That's what if, Wayne. It's techie. I'm telling you, I can't wait for that. I'm amped. I feel like I'm talking myself into I'm working myself into a shoot as far as F1 things. Max don't like us anymore. He's taken his ball and gone home, says Selvin, because we won't let him. Selvin, behave yourself. After all that, see, this is what I'm saying, Selvin. Don't listen to me, because I'm a Max fan, Max Glazer, each and every single time. Don't pay me any attention, do you know what I mean? Because I'm talking out my mind. No longer is it truth, value and objectivity. Never sacrificing either one of those things at the altar of confirmation bias, nor any other cognitive dissonance worthy of the moniker. Now I'm deferring to the experts, just to make sure that my insecurity isn't, do you know what I mean, isn't bubbling to the surface for some substantive reason. Maybe I'm talking rubbish here, so I'll sense check my maths with the one that is Martin Brundle and Ted Kravitz, these guys and girls who are infinitely closer to the aspect that is the one that F's, as at the 9th of the 5th 2025. Let's have a look at this. Let me go through some comments, because it's meant to be you. This show is not meant to be me just waffling. It's meant to be you, me and you talking about, gone, I believe in Red Bull. Bloody Nora. I'm not sure I believe in Red Bull, if I'm honest. There's too much chaos going on there. Wheatman gone. Wheatley gone even, excuse me. Wheatley gone. Newey gone. Marshall gone. Like, who's left? What, Enrico Balbo and Pierre Vacher? Behave yourself. I don't think they've got it, if I'm being honest with you. If past this prologue, what have they done? What have they fixed for? Again, when you have Adrian Newey at the team, you can do certain things right. If things go wrong, you've got a guy in Adrian Newey who understands all facets of the racing game, that he's a driver, so he gets the level of technical feedback that they need to give for him to go and institute for his problem solving. He's the dude that can get underneath the car and fix it by himself. Do you know what I mean? That's who you've got in Adrian Newey. So he has the ability to take a step back and see the F1 wood for the F1 trees in a way that not too many people, engineer, driver, aerodynamicist or mech engbod, not too many of them have in history. Not the way that Adrian can do it. And that's why when he walks out the door, Houston, we have a problem. And Christian Horner might have one too very soon. Hopefully Red Bull will unlock this car. So go on to that point. The rumour is that they're meant to be bringing upgrades to Imola. Whether those upgrades work, I mean, they brought an upgrade to Miami, didn't they? A floor upgrade. And even then, Max Verstappen wasn't too happy with it. As far as the absolute terms performance, the problem for Red Bull's always been this. They would bring additional or incremental points in terms of aerodynamic downforce. Their upgrades will work, but it will make the car almost proportionally as much downforce and performance as that upgrade will bring. It will bring as much downside as far as how difficult that car is to drive. South Acura legend. Can Max and Lewis both in the McLaren. Oh, what a season that would be. I know 2021 settings all over again, Safa, couldn't he? Especially if Lewis can remember who he is and get back his mojo. But I'm curious to see where Red Bull go from this, because I'm just concerned. I feel like every time they bring an upgrade, there is an equal and opposite downside. Every point of downforce in absolute terms that the upgrade brings, they lose something in terms of drivability, and they can't keep. Do you know what I mean? This isn't a seesaw upgrade downgrade thing. It cannot be, because the other lot will beat McLaren. We see the rate at which they can develop a car now that they've got the last front wing bender in Rob Marshall. We see what they're on. So you can't afford to. There is no time. There is the opportunity cost of time. And anytime you bring an upgrade, then it doesn't work because your wind tunnel's fudged, or some like Cold War wind tunnel or whatever. Like, you cannot afford it. Not if you want to win races and therefore championship. You're a legend. But if Max won't win, then I'll go for Oj. I think Oscar Piastri is definitely favourite, 1,000%, and I think he's right to be favourite. Do you see the way that dude's moving? The company that he's keeping, rarefied air now. First McLaren driver, if I recall correctly, since Hacken in 1998 to win 3 races back to back to back. And again, the only other ones were like Ayrton Senna and bloody Alain Prost. So like that's rarefied air. And again, he's won more 6-5 Grand Prix wins versus Lando and Norris, when Oscar Piastri is in his 3rd season and Lando's in his 7th. What? Hang on. Now I know you got to normalise for the fact that they've only both just got a car capable of winning races, so you must want to discount 5 or 6 years of Lando Norris's career if you're going to compare like for like and apples with apples. But yeah, and still, Lando's got to be looking at that thinking, oh my god, the pressure cooker and the achievement claustrophobia, the expectation pressure doom loop is doing one of these in Lando and Norris's head, and I don't think that benefits. That's why we said at the start of the season, if Lando wants to win, the perfect circumstances that he does like Alain Prost did many moons ago and just gets out the gate, or Nigel even in his championship winning season, get out the gate quick to alleviate all of that pressure, because I just don't think that dude operates best in those circumstances, and I'm not sure he's prepared to do what's necessary to change those variables. I don't think he's going to go to a shrink or like a sports psychologist like Nico Rosberg did in 2016. He's not going to spend 2 hours of his 2 hours a day, 2 hours every other day sat with. I just don't think he has that in him, that level of commitment, that level of I'm going to do what's necessary to get this over the line. Lando Norris wants to win a championship desperately, but I don't think he's prepared to pay the tax requisite to get there. You know what I mean? Not everybody can take that journey, sadly, as far as F1 drivers are concerned. Most of them will come and go and not even get a sniff of a championship. But no, to the point about Red Bull, I'm not sure what's going on. They just keep bringing upgrades and they're not working. In fact, it almost feels like I tell a lie. You know, I said that there's an equal and opposite downside. Every downforce point that they gain, it feels like they unwind in terms of drivability, which probably ultimately loses more from the package than it gains. I think for every single downforce point they're gaining, they're losing additional in terms of drivability. That's what it feels like Maximilian Verstappen is saying. So I don't know. And everything that Max is saying is like, I understand what's going on with the car, but I'm not sure they do. Mate, it's chaotic over at Red Bull. They need some answers, and some answers quickly, because heads will roll. It is DEFCON 1. We are at the 11th hour as far as Red Bull are concerned, and I won't be surprised, not necessarily to see Ollie Oakes come in that team, but sometimes the sword of Damocles at the bulls that are red is quick and swift, and some don't see it coming. 2021 Christian Horner would have been gone had Max Verstappen not brought home the bacon. Max lives inside Lando's head rent-free, says Jody. That's not true for Oscar. If anything, Oscar will very quietly go about trying to get into Max. I tell you what, Jody, I don't think he even cares. I just think all of that's like water. I think, what's the right term? I think for Oscar, all of those like sledging and getting into, I just think that's out of scope. It's not even that he doesn't care about it. I just think it's like, I want to win. He's just the Terminator. a chess playing Terminator as far as his very unique brand of automotive pugilism. I don't think you can play those games with Oscar Piastri because it's wasted effort. He has zero reaction to it. Andrea Stella said right very eloquently that there is zero mind noise in Oscar Piastri. So to try and sledge him or get in his head is it's almost like you're wasting your own bandwidth. It's an exercise in futility. He just doesn't care. You can see the way he reacts and moves and talks in the driver's press conference. It's like he feels nothing. He just wants to win. And in that sense, somebody said it the other day, right, that Max Verstappen, the Oscar Piastri might be Max 2. I said Max Verstappen 2.0 and many people didn't like it. But again, don't grice his razor me. The way that Oscar sees Max this and raises him a level. I don't think he's as fast as Max, nor do I think he's good in terms of his racecraft, nor in the overtake, both attacking and defensive. Not yet, but it's only his third season. Where I think that he might have something on Max is that you'll never hear him, even in his worst race, I just don't think he'll raise his voice. Whereas Max sometimes, not saying that affects his driving necessarily, but you'll hear Max Austria last year, the fudging car won't turn. I'm -5 on the brake bars. What are you lot doing? I'm trying to save the strategy. This S8, Max will have that. And I don't think it affects Max necessarily, at least not materially. But Oscar just doesn't have it. It's almost like he's anaesthetised, numb to all of the, like he's just out of scope. And I think that's bonkers. I think that makes him very, very dangerous as a proposition, not just for Max, but for the other 18 on the grid. It's bonkers. Max can't win it unless the race director behave yourself, Selvin. Go for 50k senior, Anna. I promise you, we'll get there. I mean, I just need to roll up my sleeves and continuously improve in a way that Lando, like Oscar is, as versus Lando Norris. Do you know what I mean? The one who allows that is Lando Norris, rent free to. I just think, and it's so sad. Let me say about Lando. Everyone, you go too hard on it. Here's the problem with Lando Norris. He's he's rapid. He's so fast, Scroopy. So how much did I bet? On Max on pole. So I think I lost on Max on pole. No, did I lose on Max? I thought Max would win the sprint. So I think I lost a couple of quid on that. But again, the pole proper for the Grand Prix was the bet, wasn't it? Let me tell you where I am with Lando's around third base. I almost feel sorry for the I know I've been super harsh on him, but I can't be that harsh on a Latifi or a Lance Stroll, or do you know what I mean? I've got to extend them some grace. But because I know that dude's so good, because you've seen how quick he is, Sandvort last year, I almost find it frustrating that he's not taking the necessary steps to bridge that bloody mental fortitude gap. It's just there for him. It's like it's right there, Lando, but he just doesn't. I heard him in an interview with or a podcast, the Pivot podcast with RC Ryan Clark, Super Bowl winner, and in that he started speaking about how he doesn't really fuss for legacy too much. That he wants to go off and do other things at some point. Now it wasn't retirement talk, but I think it made me realise I've always suspected that Lando wasn't as committed as say a Max or a Lewis in his hay or Oscar now. And hearing Lando talk like that makes me think he's almost his attitude is where kind of where Lewis always has been. To be fair, he wants to do other things. He's not just a driver. Whereas Oscar and Max, that's where they are. Do you know what I mean? And I just think I don't know that singularity of focus. I think it's worth that. I think in there is lap time. Remco, you're a legend and too kind as always. Red Bull announced the 3-part upgrade, with the third one being in Imola. If the car doesn't switch on in Imola, game over. Yeah, it's going to be. I think Imola is like not quite game over, but nearly. I think round 9, the Spanish Grand Prix, where they institute for the new bloody flexi wing rules and the parameters. 15 millimeters at the front portion of the front wing becomes 13, I want to say, and then that the back portion of the front wing, the parameters move from 5 to 3, I want to say, don't quote me. And here's hoping that Red Bull, but McLaren, the joke is McLaren already saying that their wing is or if not this one, but they have a wing that already ticks all those new parameter boxes of the TD18 or whatever it's called. I don't know, chat. I don't know. It's going to be that McLaren is formidable. Or maybe somebody spots something about this phase changing material. I don't know. Now that B Sport, the legend that is of YouTube, has put that video out there, then do you know what I mean? Hopefully these guys are watching these videos and learning. So can you imagine if the next Grand Prix at Imola, Red Bull all of a sudden have the quickest brand new brake ducts in the upgrade list, and all of a sudden they're minimizing for the rate at which their tires deg, just like MCL3 at Houston. Then McLaren have a problem, because they should be forget 20 points down the road from Max. There should be like a good 30 or 40, given the advantage that they've taken through to a quarter of the season now, 4 races, 6 races down, 6 rounds done, 24 races, like 18 to go. Oscar would beat Verstappen if they were both in McLaren. Surf Source, behave yourself. Based upon one, that's going to be the conversation, I'm telling you. I doubt it very much. I doubt it very much. I think if Lando, I don't think Lando's as quick as Max. Because if he were as quick as Max, then he would have out-qualified him, though, at the last 3 races. So then what about when Max gets in that McLaren instead of Lando? If basic F1 maths, and it doesn't work like this because there's loads of different variables that you have to normalise for and change. But, do you know what I mean? If you think Lando, I don't know. Lando is, maybe I'm disrespect. Maybe I need to put some more respect on Lando's name, because he is quick. He is definitely quick. Lando, the modern day Nico Rosberg minus the jack. Oh my gosh, Lando. What are we doing here, mate? Remco, no, Jomo, you're a legend of a different variety. Purple sectors each and every single time. Joanna says, I don't think the wings will help. Now, I've heard about that weird breaky thing. I know. Well, I think, go on then, Joanna. You raise a valid point. I keep reading that the gift of the MCL39 lies in a couple different things. It's not as simple and or linear as just saying, well, it's the tyres. The tyres, warming them up quickly and keeping them in that optimal operating window is one point. Andrea Stella was in the news this week saying that the cooling is also important. They've got this super efficient cooling to where when they get around hotter climes, I don't know, a Saudi or a Miami, let's say, you can see all the other teams start to doctor and tinker for their bodywork, building these bloody gaps in so that they don't overheat their engines and cooling systems. Do you know what I mean? Whereas something about the McLaren, they don't need it. They close it. There's barely any extra hole. It's like, what are they doing? It's bonkers. And then plus they've got both drivers there. That's the next thing. And then aerodynamic efficiency. So I'd say that the McLaren advantage rests. There's a couple central tenets, being the tyre thing, the phase, I always forget the name, the phase changing materials or whatever it's called. And then, of course, you've got to talk about their aerodynamic efficiency by dint of the flexi wing at the front and potentially the rear. And then you've got to talk about their efficient cooling, which means that they lose less of their aerodynamic efficiency in hotter climate. Honestly, it's a few different things, and it would be hard to apportion a percentage to each. I think when it's hotter, and it will change again depending on the climate and the track. It's techie. It is techie, Joanna. Jody says, Scroopy, I only put £7 on him, but I'm kicking myself. Max, are you talking about? So I think I've still got, if I recall correctly, as a betting degenerate, I think I've still got Max to win the championship. But keep that between us, right? Nobody's watching. It's techie. Right, chat, I'm going to run. You guys are legends. 444 of you in the chat. You guys are a different caliber. I hope you enjoyed that. Go and check out the Sky Sports F1. Listen, I take the mic, but that one, it's almost like the tale of two podcasts. The second one that came out where they were talking about Alpine and Jack Doohan and Ollie Oakes and what happened there. Was it Flavio? Did they fall out because Flavio wanted Colapinto and Ollie Oakes, his guy is Jack Doohan, and he didn't feel like Jack Doohan got a long enough tenure to DRS and all this other stuff that you've got to... Did they fall out? So they were discussing this on that Sky Sports F1 podcast. No bueno. Like bringing the sport and the entity that is Sky F1 into disrepair. It was so, but like you would never believe. Bernie, bless her. No, Bernie wasn't even on that one, to be fair to her. But that is just poor. Why can't I hear? Should we ever listen to it again? Why can't I hear the Grinch in the background. What are we doing? It's nonsense. Can't pay £90 for this level of podcast. This is a bit again just for fits and kicks of the round third.
Only said, I didn't know. His last words for Alpine. I didn't know. What am I supposed to do when he was tagged and crashed?
What?
Do we think? Of his own, he said, I didn't know. His last words for Alpine. I didn't know. What am I supposed to do when he was tagged and crashed? Do we think it's going to be difficult?
I cannot chat. It's too much. It's too much. What is that noise? It's been a long while since I watched Blade, but I'm sure there's a creature in that film that sounds exactly like that. I wonder how much they paid that creature to make an impromptu appearance, making his debut or her debut on the Sky Sports F1 podcast. You guys have been legends. Back a little bit early tomorrow. We'll go 9 a.m. British Standard Time, discussing and pulling all the F1 centric threads as we are obliged to. Between now and then, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.